Welcome!
Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and the finale to What If Roman Reigns Was in The Walking Dead. Before we get started, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage, where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, both Google Docs, and everything the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse, sharing the Omniverse around, turning on all Omniversal notifications, and commenting future requests and expectations in the comments section. With all that said, let's begin and finish the story of the tribal chief Roman Reigns in The Walking Dead. We ended off where we left off last time, with Roman facing Virginia as the next biggest threat to him shaping the world in the bloodlines and himself's image. Virginia tries all she can to direct her ranch, her community, and her people against the tribal chief. But even without 3, 4, 5 plus communities at his helm, the bloodline alone is way more than strong enough to flush Virginia out within seconds. And with so many more people than canon, along with the bloodline, Virginia's left groveling and begging on her knees. But then Dakota is figured out in the community, showing that Virginia wasn't the only one left. And she says, I don't care what you do to my sister, but don't kill me. I want to be a part of your community, your future, your bloodline. And she acknowledges Roman. And personally, she doesn't care about Virginia. Roman's like, this kid is probably the strongest kid that I've ever met. And Roman says, no, I'm not going to kill you. And which he's talking to Dakota. You get to live yourself in the bloodline. But then he stares down Virginia and says, are you going to be as smart as your sister here? Or do I have to force you, like I already have, to acknowledge me? But Virginia smiles and says, it'll be you on the ground in a second, my tribal chief. And then out from nowhere, Emil with his axe just starts slaughtering members of the bloodline and the communities. First Jake, then Gretchen and her family. But before he could kill anybody else, Sammy Uso, or Sami Zayn, whatever the frick you want to call him, uses a barbed wire chair and slams it straight into Emil, putting him on the ground. And Roman Reigns says, now you have no choice but to acknowledge me. And he says he likes Emil. He likes his way of moving around and his weapon choice with the axe, and just him in general. He's not going to kill him. So he won't have to worry about that. And he's lucky that he's even being this nice. If this were a few years ago, he wouldn't be this nice. But Roman Reigns is on top of the world, which has made him nicer and kind of more of a tyrant. So, just depends. But then he looks down at the ground, at the only one left, and says to Virginia, any more surprise visitors you want to introduce? Or are we done here? And Virginia says, no, I'm done. I acknowledge you, my tribal chief. But if you really want to kill me, I just need you to know one thing about Dakota and myself, and something I must tell her as well. And then she reveals the whole, Dakota's her daughter thing. And she gets the chance to tell Dakota, which goes about the same way. And after that, Emil and his dog get to live on. As for Josiah, pretty much don't include him in the story. He's not really that relevant. But don't worry, he eventually comes around and gets figured out. But he's not really a focal point since he was barely used at all. So let's just say Josiah does meet Emil once again. It's just, not really a major plot point. But Emil, the dog, and Josiah all are around nonetheless. And Virginia and Dakota get to stay with the bloodline and eventually solve their differences. Eventually, Wes gets figured out because, obviously, and we're not going to be getting Althea and Isabel because the CRM, they would not be around to find out about the CRM, and they, even if they did somehow find Isabel, I don't think that it would happen. But at this point, with everything going so fast and so powerful and so freaking successful for the bloodline in all these communities, if by some miracle Isabel did come around and we did see her along with several CRM soldiers, you're going to see why that will not matter. Eventually, Rabbi gets figured out by Charlie and everybody else, and he joins the group. Isaac and Rachel and eventually their baby join the group, and they get to live. As for communities, the oil plant is the bloodlines. Lawton belongs to the bloodline. John's cabin, still John's, but it is insured and protected and safeguarded by the bloodline. And as for Lake Town, or, the big damn community of Morgan's that was his, that gets taken over as well. But then you get the Sherry and the masked people, or, the Virginia Rebellion group, as I'm going to call them. And once they make themselves known, every one of the masked people are either killed or forcibly put into acknowledging the tribal chief and Roman Reigns. But one figures out about acknowledgement, Roman Reigns, Morgan, and the death of Dwight, she is furious and just like Dwight sees Negan all over. And just pulls out a gun and starts firing incessantly. First at Virginia, so hey, in this story, she actually gets her wish. Then Ophelia. Then Lee, Ephraim, and Lola, before being shot down completely by the bloodline. As for Teddy and the group, well, they are the last major big threat, or the next major big threat. Roman Reigns looks on and figures out more about Teddy and his people and what their plans are, and he just cracks up at this because they're stupid. And the way they're going about it, and Teddy being crazy, this is the craziest, weirdest, and honestly stupidest group he's probably ever met in his life. And he says, this is going to be easier than anything they've ever done. And whether they have this big world extinction plan or not, this is going to be beyond easy. As for the guy in the shack, Ed, well, with all the, animal belongings and, the whole Alicia, Morgan, and Charlie segment, I feel that he would maybe live and his shack would get taken over by the bloodline, but it really doesn't matter. I feel that he gets that privilege to live in this story. And they would still meet and everything, except to be under way different circumstances. Then when we get to Teddy's group and the underground bunker, the bases, everything, bullets, arrows, and complete chaos rings down, and all of them are killed instantly. Like I said, this was beyond easy because of how stupid, weak, and just simple-minded Teddy's group was. The only thing they had to their advantage was the freaking nuke. So, yeah. So, no nuke. That means that the world, especially the fear world, is way, 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 way more populated and safe. But also there's more walkers. But that has not been an issue this entire time. So why would it be an issue now? John would eventually meet up with his father after a very, very long time, getting the reunion that the father and son duo, Senior and Jr. would should have gotten in canon. So, hey, another good thing that should have happened in the show. And as for, all the underground bunkers, the bases, the planning, all that stuff that happened after the nuke and like all that stuff, it's not even worth talking about because, like I said, with how far Roman Reigns' group is, the Bloodline, Madison, everybody, it's just not even worth pointing out that they're nothing. As for Padre, it's also way, 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 way different because not only has Madison not sacrificed herself, but she's also not leveraged for Padre, along with Padre being discovered in a much different way since they've taken over community after community after community after community. So, with all that said, and Madison not being used as leverage by Padre and no Morgan, even without him, Shrike and all of Padre, it's not even worth talking about. All the kids are saved, and Padre's theirs for the taking. And with this, for the Fear the Walking Dead side at least, Roman Reigns and the Bloodline have made every community, every person, pretty much, 70%, and everything theirs. And Roman Reigns stands atop it all. Seemingly, to many, a tyrant, but to the vast majority, especially Madison, who made this arrangement with him from the very beginning, a true savior for their world. And it's not stopping. But one day, Troy, the wise man, Strand, Madison, and a bunch of others see Rabbi come towards them and says, after a good, amount of time after they've conquered Padre, like a few years at least, like 3, 4, 5 years, Rabbi says, we have visitors. And everybody goes to the gates and sees it's Daniel. He's alive and he's here. It's been freaking years. But there's also a bunch of soldiers behind them. Not too many, but a few. But the main two that are with Daniel is a bigger, taller, and much more muscular man in a full-on decked out armor and helmet with a lot of weapons belted around his entire body. And then a second one in a much more relaxed and very less dimmed down attire. And whenever the big muscular man with a huge ton of weapons removes his helmet, it's revealed to be the Rock, the final boss, and the one that Daniel had been chasing this entire time. Which, if you guys didn't see, this was bound to happen eventually, because I wasn't going to keep that just, down and out without an explanation. Daniel looks at Madison, and it's been years since he saw everybody, and how everything has changed. Multiple communities thriving. Whenever him, the Rock, and this other guy and a bunch of soldiers were making their way to finally find, Ophelia, the Bloodline, and everything like that, they did not know that almost all the world has become thriving because of one group, and that Madison is there with them. But then Daniel asked a question which many, especially one, was going to have to ask eventually. Daniel wants to know, where is Ophelia? The person that he had disregarded looking for ever since he tracked down, or was tracking down, the Rock. He wants to know where his daughter is, and that he wants her to still be alive. And then he looks directly at Strand, the person that lied to him, put him at that hotel, and who ran away and never saw him again since. But Strand says it was an honest mistake. And then Strand goes on to tell Daniel that Ophelia was alive. He had just made the biggest mistake of thinking that she was still at the hotel. But by the time that anything else was set in stone, Daniel was gone. And by the time he returned to the dam and then was imprisoned and then also became a full-fledged community member of the bloodline, Daniel never came back. And Ophelia, she was killed in cold blood by someone who wanted to end everything that they built, along with a lover of theirs, which it's not even worth pointing out anymore. But just know she lived for a very long time. And Daniel was so close to one day seeing her again. But he does not blame him. But what they do want to know is who these guys are with Daniel. Why did he leave for years on end? It doesn't make sense. But then The Rock speaks up and introduces himself as Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. He's a member of the bloodline. And he says he's Roman Reigns' cousin, the final boss, and full-fledged member of the bloodline. You see, whenever the apocalypse first started, he wasn't with the bloodline. He was part of ways from Los Angeles. And it was a decent ways, too, but close enough he could see all the fire and destruction, and he knew that his only chance was to find his family. But considering that they were not together from the beginning, and considering where he was and the destruction of Los Angeles, soldiers and helicopters and walkers everywhere, it took him a very, very, very long time to even come close to trying to track down his family. But then he got very close. He had seen a hotel, which seemed to be a landmark for something. And considering where he was, he knew he was getting close. He could just feel it. But he didn't know at first that as he was making his way towards seemingly getting a checkpoint and looking for his family, that he was being tailed by Daniel Salazar. But eventually, the two did cross paths, but The Rock put him in his place. And it was a very epic fight, with Daniel almost getting killed. But he did really put up a good fight. And The Rock says for an old man, older than even him, he did not expect him to be this much of a powerful fighter. So the two teamed up together and mentioned what they were after. And since Daniel did not find Ophelia and Strand lied to him, Daniel was inclined, not so much inclined, but he felt it his mission to help The Rock look for his family, since Daniel couldn't find his own. And then whenever they found his family, maybe, just maybe, they could find Ophelia. So eventually they continued their journey, but that little shortcut that The Rock took past the hotel and then was tailed by Daniel actually lured him away from the bloodline when The Rock was so close to getting there. So they had taken a detour so big that it led them to a big group that was responsible for everything. It was called the CRM. And because of this, because of the CRM, The Rock, along with the help of a man called Rick Grimes, Michonne Grimes, Morgan Jones, and Daniel here at his side, along with encountering a friend next to him, they were able to not only conquer the CRM, but make it part of their own. They were actually able to control, contain, and completely take over the group that had started the bombings of Los Angeles and the destruction of Atlanta. When with this big group under their control, The Rock and Daniel knew that they could find Ophelia and the bloodline because they had everything at their disposal and they no longer had to worry about travailing the world on foot and worrying about just starving and looking aimlessly. So, this means that they basically had it all made. And as for everybody else, since Morgan was just brought up, and Madison and everybody else has taken in the whole Los Angeles, the Rock being closed, the bombings, it's just so much to take in. And then The Rock, Daniel, and their friend right here, along with the rest of the CRM, they made it back to their own communities, as well as Morgan did, along with The Rock, Daniel, and a few others, along with his friend here. They were able to finally find the bloodline and everything that they had built on the other side of the world, and it led them right to this spot right here at the very end of it all. And with this, The Rock reunites with the tribal chief Roman Reigns, his family, his blood, and they mourn the death of Paul Heyman. But now, The Rock stares down at Troy, who is the new wise man for the bloodline, and they talk about everything that had happened before the apocalypse, like during it, and Roman explains everything. And The Rock couldn't be more proud to call Roman Reigns his family and the true tribal chief. But Troy does ask, okay, that explains everything, except one teeny tiny little thing. Who is your friend right there? Who's that guy who hasn't taken his helmet off yet? And why was he so important to you? So, the helmeted soldier steps forward and he takes off his helmet to reveal John Cena. And that's where our story ends. Now I know it ended abruptly. Just like my Dale story, just like my Cliff story, just like my Sea Spray story. Many stories here have ended abruptly. But why this one, Nick? Why in this new Omniverse did you have one of the seemingly best stories seem to be building up so high, to build up even higher, to have a huge ending reveal for no big payoff? Or was there supposed to be a payoff? What's the deal? And why was it John Cena? And why was there no, betrayal of Troy or anything? Trust me, I will answer all your questions right now. That's what all these ending speeches are here for in the Omniverse. It's the exact reason I did it after the Dale story. So, number one, Roman Reigns' story and family is already humongous, especially if you watch the frickin' WWE. You have himself, Solo Sikoa, the Usos, the Tongans, Jacob Fatu, JC Mateo, Naomi, Nia Jax, Haikalu or Tala Tonga. You have frickin' Sami Zayn. You have his entire bloodline. And then you have Walker's group, and they were frickin' decently stacked. You have all of Madison's, and it just kept growing bigger and bigger because Roman Reigns, unlike Walker, doesn't play. He will force you to acknowledge him. And that's basically what he did. Now, the reason that there was no betrayal, there was. Because, Troy did try, and we all know how that went. That's why Troy became his wise man. And it forced all bad character, or, by bad character, I mean going to betray on you type character, out of Troy. And when he got to get together with Serena, and they had Tracy, Troy was a full-fledged good guy. Much better wise man than Paul Heyman. By the way, killing Paul Heyman or killing Roman Reigns' family or anything was in no way to disrespect the OTC, the Tribal Chief, or Paul Heyman. It's all purely for story stuff, not meant to be taken seriously. Nothing against the characters, for people who are gonna be coming at me in the comments. But anyways, yeah. I felt like Paul Heyman was not going to last very long in retrospect, so he needed a replacement. And who better than the #1 character of The Walking Dead's Fear section, Troy freaking Otto. And I did have some characters killed. It's just I had to create situations for them. Dwight and Sherry, obviously, were really the only ones besides Emil. It's the best way to go about it. And Emil turning good and Virginia almost turning good were directions I didn't think I was going to go. But I was almost thinking it was going to end up just like my John and Daniel story, which is getting remade here very, very soon. But I had to stop myself and rotate it a different direction because it's nowhere close to the message or detailing of my John and Daniel story. So I had to think twice and do something different with it. So this is what I did. Now, the reason that I did not have The Rock with Roman Reigns at the start is because if I did that, there'd be nothing left at the end. So, for example, The Rock stays with the group the entire time. It's like, hey, the story mostly goes the same, except it's millions of times easier with The Rock. Possibly no one dies at all. But it also means that Daniel stays with the group. It means it's also a trillion times easier. It means Ophelia's alive, and no big surprise reveal, and the ending would really just be bland and pointless. This would not be a good story if that were the case. So I had to make him... He had to not be there. That's why the Rock story was created to interloop with Roman Reigns. Now, for those of you wondering, well, okay, that's all fine and good. What happened to Morgan? What happened to Daniel and Rock? How did all this happen? How did they meet? How did they meet the CRM? How did they get away? Did Heath live? What about Rick and Michonne? If this is past 6 years, then where are they? Where's Morgan? And most importantly of all, why is John Cena there? You say you never include him in anything after your old, over 3-year-old John Cena video ever again. What are you doing including him in a cameo here, looking like a heel CRM soldier? Well, this is going to be a bit of a little tale here, so strap yourselves in. So, I had Morgan leave because, like Dwight and Sherry, he viewed Roman Reigns as another Negan, which, in a way, he's absolutely right. So, Morgan would go back to Alexandria, and he would help out the group against the Whisperers. He would most likely not get there in time to save Rick from blowing up the bridge, however. If I had to guess, it would be... Now, for those of you who have not seen it yet, in my John and Daniel story, I teased that Morgan was able to get there right, and John and Daniel and everybody else and Sherry were able to get there before Rick blows up the bridge. Now, Morgan most likely would be able to get there before the bridge blows. But even if he did, I don't think that him by himself with everybody else, without probable cause from Roman Reigns, the Bloodline, or anybody else, would stop Rick from sacrificing himself. So, where does it go from there? Well, since Morgan staying with them as a lone what-ifs never happened, I'm just going to answer that here and you can visualize what happens in your heads. So, picture this. Morgan leaves the bloodline and everybody after everybody else joins, okay? And then he leaves, he gets there, finds out what happens, he lives with all of what's happened, he stays, finds out that Henry is growing, Rick sacrifices himself, maybe even sees Morgan as a vision, Morgan is broken down, thinks about joining back with Masson and all those people, but Henry's there, he remembers him, and like Daryl, he stays out for over 6 years to look for him. But he fails. And with Morgan there, the war with the Whisperers, I've done Morgan with the Whisperers time after time after time after time after time. So, we all know how that ends. But, with Morgan being the only change on the Walking Dead side, the story barely changes at all. You just have a man that are on the same level as Canon Morgan, whether which side you put him in. There's really no way to change Morgan in this story. So, Morgan honestly would just be a much needed better help. He would be in a Carol situation and everything whenever Henry dies, and along with Ezekiel, and he would also most likely just stay out of the way, especially whenever Negan's brought up to kill Alpha. And then he would actually be, since I've really never included it in the story before, he would be a great hand in taking care of the Reapers were it not for the fact that Virgil, because this is where the Walking Dead side completely goes back to canon. Like, Morgan doesn't matter anymore after this. So, when we get to Virgil, Morgan actually goes with Michonne. So, you think that this is where I'm going to be like, oh, one of them dies or something, like they did in canon, or, something like that, or maybe they get together and then screw Rick. Not in that way, but like, screw him as in they don't care about him. But no. They go together to go find Rick, and I'm actually going to not do what if Morgan wasn't the ones who live now, because this is where I'm putting him in. He goes with Michonne to go find Rick, and they go ahead and rescue Rick trillions of times easier. So, by the time this is where the story ends for this side. I will get back to Morgan, Michonne, Rick, and what happens on that end. But just know the Walking Dead side, all that happened was Morgan showed up and he was a better help. That's it. Nothing else changed. Morgan is a not changing character in this story. Period. Besides the fact that he found extra people before he left after finding Roman Reigns. That's it. So, the other question you guys might have. What about Daniel and The Rock? Why was The Rock all the way over at the hotel and then Daniel tracked him? Well, you see, remember, The Rock was not far from Los Angeles, because that's close to where his hometown is. So, he was tracking down Roman Reigns and his family, but he also saw that he was being tracked himself. At some point, after leaving the hotel, it took a minute, but he finally caught on. So before Atlanta, The Rock and Daniel have a scuffle. This fight is brutal to the core, but The Rock is obviously way more adept and stronger than Daniel, even if Daniel is a cold-blooded assassin. I just do not think that he would have. He is an old man after all. So The Rock would beat him. After that, they would both get captured by the CRM, and all together, Rick, Michonne, Morgan, The Rock, and Daniel would all not only defeat BL Okafor and the CRM, maybe Okafor teams up with them and survives too, but they manage to rein in the CRM, kill Jadis, and use it to their advantage. And The Rock finds a certain someone manipulated by the CRM just like Rick was, and just like Thorne was. This is where I put in John Cena. Yeah. His heel, and the best way to make a remake of what I did with John Cena was by merging him into this story, making him a heel CRM soldier, and making him the surprise cameo that you really couldn't see till the end. Which was the perfect way to cap off of whatever mistakes and, like, I don't know, bad writing or anything that I did with John Cena in the past. It was just a simple analysis. This was the best way to center him in a story by doing that, and I really hope that you guys loved that. So, all of them managed to escape. Cena doesn't stay a heel CRM soldier for too long, though. It was just, I had to do the whole heel look just to show that he was the one. So with all that said, Rick, Michonne, and Morgan would return to Alexandria, and Daniel, The Rock, and John Cena would return to The Rock's family. And Daniel would unfortunately have to learn the news her daughter's dead. And The Rock would be reunited with Roman Reigns in the Bloodline. They would have tens of bunches of communities, and eventually would cross over to the others. And since there had already been word spread about Roman Reigns' bloodline, Morgan would eventually be swayed more over along with Rick and everybody else, and soon the whole world of The Walking Dead would truly acknowledge not only the bloodline, but the OTC, Roman Reigns. And that's the story, folks. To tap it all off, Roman Reigns and the bloodline being in The Walking Dead would not only mean that from the get-go, you pretty much have everything set in stone for them to be more powerful than anything The Walking Dead would try to throw at them, but especially fear The Walking Dead. Now, if they were thrown in The Walking Dead first, oh, that definitely, they would have probably died much sooner. Or at least, like, you know, all the bloodline except Roman Reigns. But putting them in Fear the Walking Dead was the only way to center them into a story, so this is the way it had to go. But, I say, quite a story, Well, I hope you guys enjoyed What If Roman Reigns and What If The Rock and the little shake on John Cena remake being in The Walking Dead. The next story is Bonnie in the Ginyu Force, so stay tuned, hyped and packed for the ongoing Omniverse of Nick.